Welcome back to Leadership Roundtable. I'm joined by some repeat guests and very excited about this topic because it can be slightly controversial from time to time. So before we dive into that, I would like give my guests an opportunity to introduce themselves. Dorothy, welcome back.
Well, thank you. I'm Dorothy Graham O'Dell. I'm from Windsor, Ontario. As John had said before, the next Oprah Winfrey here in Canada. Uh, we have some amazing shows to help support you in your life, your business, and in if you're somebody who has a background in service. For our veterans and first responders, we give a platform for them to be able to share their stories, and we talk about subjects that most people don't. So nothing is taboo on our shows, and we would love to have you over there. Also, an author, a stepmom, and a wife. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy. I appreciate you joining us. Kevin, welcome back.
Yes, thanks, John. Kevin Phillips. I'm currently an instructor at the University of Tampa. Have written 3 books on leadership and business, and earned my PhD from Carolina University and MBA from the University of Michigan, and love the university culture and experience, and really enjoy teaching at the university level.
Fantastic. Appreciate that, Kevin. I also love the university experience. Went to college for a lot of years. Took me until I was 40 to graduate, but yeah,
You got it, though.
I did. I finally got there. So I want to dive into this, and the second, or the topic that we're going to talk about today is optimism versus toxic positivity, and this is something that I'm pretty passionate about because I don't necessarily believe in toxic positivity, but I do admit that it exists. And the quote that inspired this was from Viktor Frankl. And before I dive into the quote, because I think knowing who he is allows his quote to really settle in better. But Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist and psychologist, philosopher, also a Holocaust survivor. And so this quote is in his book, and it really relates specifically to what he's been through or what he had been through at that point in his life. And the quote is, um, the last of the human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And I firmly believe in this choosing your attitude. And I was introduced to the philosophy um, probably in the early 2000s. I think there was some motivational and leadership books, literally one called Choose Your Attitude, that really it allows you to understand that whatever's happening around you isn't how you're doing. How you're doing is how you're processing that data and you're absorbing that energy. And sometimes it's overwhelming, and sometimes you're going to really absorb that negative energy, and it's going to impact your day. But I think if you walk into it knowing that it truly is a blessing that we woke up this morning and we were given another day to do more with what we were given. And whatever your platform is, whatever you choose your platform to be, um, you get to do it in the frame of mind that you choose. Um, and so, from a guy who survived a concentration camp, if that guy can have the opinion that I get to choose how I handle today, I'm pretty inspired by that. So, before I continue to rant on my soapbox about this, I want to pass the microphone off to Dorothy, get Dorothy's take on that quote and mindset in general.
Absolutely. If you would have asked me that question 15 years ago, I would have said no. The world is toxic. Everybody's toxic. The places that I worked within were toxic. But I've done a lot of different work on myself and realized that, well, wait a minute, we get to choose. Just because somebody could have a different opinion or thought process than you doesn't mean that it's necessarily toxic. It just means that it's different, right? So we get to choose on basically how we handle the situation or the conversations, and just really how it affects us. Because somebody could say something to us, but we get to choose whether we believe that or not. So,
Yeah, that couldn't be more true. I know that you're across the river in Canada, but if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of misinformation being spread here in the United States currently. With by the time this airs, we will know how November 5th turns out. But yeah, you get to choose what you believe. You get to choose what you absorb and what you hear. Um, and hopefully you choose to believe the facts. But anyway, I will come back and rant on that for just a minute, but I'll let Kevin go next.
Yes, as far as I think it's a very delicate balance. Optimism versus toxic positivity. Uh, for me, the key element is not discarding reality as much as it is determining what lens you look at your situation from. So there is going to be pain in life. There are going to be challenges. Struggle is inevitably a part of everyone's life, but it's how you choose to approach the situation and what actions you take to overcome, which will really determine how you're able to overcome it and how you're able to succeed. And so there can be toxic positivity if you go down the wrong path and you choose to avoid recognizing reality. But if you recognize it and you apply action to overcome it, then that really dives into optimism as a whole.
So I agree with that, and that to me is the thing I said I was going to come back to, because this is what I think too many people label toxic positivity as. You're just you're refusing to accept and acknowledge that these things are happening, or that this person's bringing this energy to the team. And Kevin, I agree with you in your perception on that. Is, to me, it isn't about ignoring that these bad things are happening, or that these, as I mentioned to Dorothy, this misinformation is out there. It's not about ignoring it. It's really about choosing to not let it bring me down, and that I'm constantly looking for a path forward to say, sure, that thing happened and it wasn't ideal, or that person acted that way and it's not what I wanted the team to be exposed to. But it doesn't change our mission. And our mission is, we're going to have this positive outcome. We're going to hit our goals. We're going to whether it's increased sales, or if it's a sports team, maybe you're up against a series of losses. Maybe you're Aaron Rodgers and you're trying to look past all the bad things that happened. I tried to throw that sports thing in there to get Kevin to smile, because what I love about Kevin's posts on social media is he'll always try to tie something into what just recently happened. And so, toxic positivity is a thing, and it does exist, but it doesn't have to consume us. And Kevin, a little bit of a side note. I'm not sure if you saw my recent Yankees post, but that was inspired by you.
I'll have to go back and check. I haven't seen. No, I haven't been on LinkedIn in a minute. I got to go back and see what you posted.
Yeah, it's the full version is on my Substack that goes out every morning. But I think it plays into a little bit of this toxic positivity versus optimism, because the actual inspiration for that came from I was watching. My daughter plays basketball, so I've been going to all the basketball games, not only for her school, but also for the different leagues that she's in. And as I'm, from a leadership perspective, as I'm watching the kids play basketball, there's really good things that happen that score points. And then there's mistakes that happen that prevent points from happening. But, with the Yankees situation, there's mistakes that happen that actually allow your opponent to score. And I think that, that toxic energy exists on sports teams where, players immediately have a negative reaction. In my opinion, it's the players who truly understand the game, and they realize that, okay, you just missed that shot, or you didn't rebound that correctly, or I'm not familiar with baseball terms, but the ball went to the guy in the field and he didn't catch it, and like bounced off his glove, which caused for runs to be able to happen, or people to get on base, which eventually led to scoring. So like you have a choice in that moment as well, and you can absorb that negative energy for what just happened, or you can bounce back from that, and you can play harder, you can play smarter, you can focus on what you've practiced and what got you to that point. And so anyway, that's the whole gist of that. That article was brewing in my head for a while, and then I just happened to catch like that 10 minutes of the World Series. I didn't watch any other part of it. So Dorothy, as you get to know me, there's a few things that rank in my top 5 of things you'll never catch me doing: golf, fishing, baseball, basketball, and watching paint dry.
Well, that's a bummer because we have an annual golf tournament every year, my father's honor. So that's too bad that you don't play golf. We'd love to have you.
I'm a good golf cart driver, and I am a very good Tito's drinker and golf cart driver. So
Love
anyway,
it.
so I just I kind of want to throw that out there. That's my take on it. It doesn't make it the right take. I know everybody has different experiences, and so I'll toss it back out there to either of you. I know Dorothy, I pick on you a lot as ladies first, but you don't have to go first.
We'll let go Kevin. We'll have Kevin go first this time.
Sure. No, what you brought up, it's a perfect microcosm of the world we live in. The Yankees' fifth inning in the World Series, there were a multitude of errors, and one just snowballed after the other, and it created just a huge amount of negative momentum. And as a leader, I always go back to being a thermometer and not a thermostat. A thermometer sets the tone and says, okay, this is the temperature we're going to operate at. For that Yankees team, we needed to reset and say, okay, folks, we need to reestablish our thermometer, the heat in the room, because everything was getting tight. They were missing out on fundamentals, and it ended up really costing them the game. In that it was a 5-run inning that just snowballed out of control, and it put the momentum back into the Dodgers' hands. Leadership was a thermostat there. Everything elevated too high, and there was no one to reestablish what they needed to do. And so optimism at that time, saying we're going to get the next one, we're moving forward. We recognize the fact that there were errors, but we're not going to let it impact everyone. And that was a huge challenge in that game. And so I really, your example is perfect in that it highlights how things can snowball if there is a pessimist in the room, or if there's toxic positivity and you're unable to acknowledge what happened previous.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Kevin.
I love that. Well, it's funny because I'm staring at my sign here that John pointed to, and for the last 7 years, I have the privilege of watching Michigan. And so when we first got together with my husband, I noticed that they weren't playing that well, and that his commentary of his assessment of how they played, and I said, but hold on though, because their vision and their drive is those who stay will be champions. And they succeeded last year in winning the big championship. And this year they're kind of falling apart. Right. And so I hear the commentary from my husband on that of like, they suck on and on and on, but they just won like and they lost all their star players. Right. So how do you bounce back from that? You could either say, okay, wait a minute, now we're starting off with all new players, or especially in the key positions, or we can say, okay, let's just take it game for game and decide, what steps are they going to put in each game to bring them back from winning the big championship to where they're at today. And so since we're in the game analogy, that's what is coming to my mind, and there's a lot of pressure in sports with everything like that, and everybody has their opinions of how that player should have played and things like that. But I think it all comes down to grace. I mean, we have the game plan. We have the coaches on the sidelines giving the guys the proper plays and things like that. But in the moment, like if that quarterback sees something else, are you going to take it and go with it, or are you just going to just no, the coach says this, so I got to do this? I think it's if we give ourselves grace in those moments and just allow things to go either way, I think it would be, you know, a lot more. Like we could say, are you going to be upset about it, or are you just going to go with it? So, just
Yeah.
some rambling thoughts there.
Dorothy, I think that that is an amazing analogy towards real world leadership, because you talk about a quarterback, or really any uh, individual or player in a high stakes moment. All of their training, everything they've done, all the plays they've practiced, it reminds me of Rudy Giuliani's response to the September 11th, 2001 attacks in New York City. He stepped back and, after the fact, was able to say, he took a lot of credit for executing an amazing reaction to a terrorist attack. And the number one question people asked were like, how did you prepare for that? They said, we didn't. We never once ever thought that this would happen. However, we did plan for what happens when a high rise catches on fire, because we have high rises and fires happen. We did plan for what happens if we have to evacuate the city. And so we had all of these other little plans, these little steps for what do I do if, and we just happened to find ourselves in a situation where we had to execute every single one of those plans on the exact same day. And I think that speaks heavily to folks who are in that pressure moment of, I've practiced on how to move this ball down the field, or I've practiced on how to go into the boardroom and sell this proposal, but you don't know how the human on the other side are going to react. And so you have to be, a little bit quick-witted. You have to be on your feet and be able to say, okay, I practiced that this was going to go this way. But then, and this has happened to me so many times in coaching situations where, specifically if I'm dealing with a toxic personality or someone who's more aggressive in their opinions, where you don't know how they're going to react to the words that come out of your mouth. So you have to be ready, and you have to be able to analyze very quickly. I think, in the sports analogy, I think that's what makes quarterbacks as good as they are, is they're able to watch what's happening right across from them and say, okay, we've got to, and Kevin, I'm sure there's a sports word for it, but we've got to change this up and do something different, because what we're planning to do with those guys standing right there, it's not going to work. And, it's, I feel like I'm lacking a little bit of humbleness this morning, but the book that I have written that I haven't published yet, I'm in the final stages of editing on it, is about real world leadership. And it's about these moments where you have to pivot and divert, because you know what your mission is and you've got to achieve your mission. But all of the training, all of the books you've read, they didn't tell you that this person was going to flip you off, or as Mike Tyson would say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And there are verbal punches in the mouth, or things happen in the everyday business world or leadership world that completely throw you off. And so I think that it plays into this toxic positivity conversation, because if you've ever been accused of looking past someone's poor behavior and being able to really just say, yep, I see it, I acknowledge it, but it's not going to impact what I'm going to accomplish here. It can be optimism. It can be the person who just says, I'm committed to the mission. And I think we've all been in those situations. So I agree with your point there as well, Dorothy. I don't know if you want to talk through that.
Yeah, I just said COVID is the greatest pivot, because you said pivot, and immediately my mind went to COVID. We all had our game plan. We all had our execution style. Pandemic comes in, and basically the world is now at an even playing field, right? We all had to pivot in our businesses. We all had to pivot in our place of work. we went from being able to high five each other and give a handshake to stay away from me, right? You got to be 6 feet away from me or however it was. And we talked about the quarterback having to pivot, right? So if we see a different game plan, we need to be able to have that adaptability and not just say, well, that's how we've always done things, right? Because COVID, it was the greatest reminder of that. And in my opinion, if you didn't learn anything from COVID, if you didn't learn a new skill out of COVID, because we all had, extra time to do that, then I know a lot of people were like, this is the worst time of my life, and things like that. But if you choose to see it, it gave us an opportunity to spend more time with our families. It gave us an opportunity to, you know, maybe pick up a book and read it instead of the drive back and forth to work, because a lot of us were able to either work from home, or some of the world was not able to work. I know a lot of businesses closed during that time, but it gave us a real opportunity to say, wait a minute, if this isn't working, what could work, right? And be able to give ourselves an opportunity to see outside of the box that sometimes we put ourselves into.
I love it when the Canadian comes out of you.
The hands,
well,
the about.
Yeah, the pronunciation of certain words. Yeah. I think that is a phenomenal example. And I think, what's interesting is that example, I think, plays directly into toxic positivity, because there are people who will, have really strong opinions on both sides of the COVID thing. And, you touched on that, like people lost their businesses, they lost their livelihood, people lost everything during COVID because of, depending on where you lived in the world or where you lived in the US, COVID impacted people so differently. And like, I remember I went to work every single day during COVID, like 7 days a week. I was at the warehouse, and I'm driving down I-75 in Michigan, between, where I live in Clarkston and Auburn Hills, which is always packed with, people heading off to the auto industry, and being the only car on the road at any time of the day. So many people had so many different reactions to it, but I think it's interesting. The toxic positivity side of that is, I refused to let it bring me down, even though I was terrified inside of, am I going to lose my job? Is my business going to go out? Are my people going to die? Every day I would wake up just in fear of what bad thing is going to happen today because of this virus. So I think that's a great addition, Dorothy. Thanks for bringing that in.
Absolutely. I just want to say one thing to that. Like, I could choose to say, okay, wait a minute. That was also the last Christmas I could have had the opportunity to see my dad. And because of COVID, I was not able to. So if I wanted to, I could have let it bring me down, but I choose to see, the pivots that I had to make in other areas of my life to be that way. So I just wanted, I'm not all roses every day. There are some things that I'm just like, oh, and it took me a little bit to allow that to be released, because there are moments that, hey, it wasn't so great, but I choose to say, wait a minute, I became an author, I started 3 shows, I completely changed my life, so it wasn't all that bad.
Dorothy, that's another powerful point as we talk about optimism and toxic positivity, because as a leader, I actually talk about this in my training a lot, to say, don't look at me and see a perfect leader just because I'm the guy standing here with a microphone in my hand. I'm just as flawed as anybody else. And I'm out here talking about these things because they help me be a better person every day. And so I think that's a critical perspective to look at it and say, and I've mentioned this before, that when I get behind the wheel, I am the world's grumpiest driver. And I am absolutely critiquing everybody. And I'm reminded multiple times I need to choose my attitude there, because not everybody's an idiot. And so I think that your perspective on that, to say, I don't always see the world from the right perspective, is great, because we're not perfect at this, which is, I can speak for me. I don't know, maybe the two of you are perfect. But I know that I have to talk about these things and teach about these things, because for me, I've told you both this before, that's why I started writing. I started writing every day as a journal because I knew I needed to get better. Then one day I'm like, I'm going to share this, see what happens. Turns out there's a lot of people out there in the world that want to be better every day as well. So
This conversation as well, it reminds me, I mean, the examples being provided with COVID, with the sports analogies, it reminds me of, there was a story. This woman worked at a hospital and she worked at the cancer ward, and she was the one cleaning the floors. She was the janitor, she was the cleaning lady, and she would come in every day to clean the floors and clean the rooms and take care of everything. And the level of positivity and happiness and joy she presented was captivating. And leaders would always ask her, how can you be this happy? How could you be this happy every day? And she said, every day people walk in to this hospital on the worst day of their life. Like, I am a light for those people. So it really doesn't matter what your position is to dictate your influence. You have to have that positive attitude. Dealing with COVID, people lost their businesses. People struggled to keep afloat. The World Series, the Yankees lost the game. Very different consequences, but for them, it was devastating. It can be a lot worse in every element of life, oftentimes. And so, yes, there were businesses that struggled. We couldn't actually meet face to face. John was worried about losing his job. Millions of people did. This woman exemplified what leadership looked like and what optimism looked like, because regardless of her situation at home, she knew she was seeing people at their direst part of life. And that was just a captivating way for her to say, this is why my job matters, and this is what's important. It's to be a light for other people. And that was really a wonderful example that she demonstrated.
That is, and I don't know if you guys know a guy named Mike Schnott. He's the EMS professional in New York State. He has shared similar examples before, where we've been having conversations, and he essentially says the same thing. Like, I'm showing up on their worst day ever, and he's in their home, in their environment, where it just, in my mind, it adds a layer of complexities. When you're dealing with somebody in a sterile hospital environment that is built to save lives, versus in their home where, there's so many more complexities there. It's, I always look at this. I know Dorothy does a lot of work for first responders. I absolutely admire the work done by those folks, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, EMS, a cop. I don't know that I have the patience for that kind of work. And, in my mind, those are the folks who are facing the worst of the worst, and they manage to just, they're heroes. In my opinion, they are everyday heroes. So thank you for that, Kevin.
100%. Sorry, I had somebody come in my office. I'm like, no, get out.
I saw the look on your face, and I've been there, done that. And so, yeah, I was trying not to laugh while Kevin was talking.
I'm sorry, my mind went. I heard about the Yankees, and then he come in, and my husband never usually does that, so I apologize. And yeah, working with first responders, that was my hats and hearts off to every first responder, and anybody who's in the military as well. You guys get toxic positivity or toxicness all the time, and I don't think you guys get enough kudos for actually dealing with that, right? And then what I always hear is the added element of them. They come home, and then the wife is like, okay, I've been with these kids all day, now here's the kids, and they're like, can I have a shower and wash off everything that I just seen for the day, right? And then I'll play with my kids. And sometimes we just have to remind each other to give everybody grace. And I will wrap that up. Just say that I saw your message.
No. Yeah, Dorothy, I tend to rattle on forever, and so I apologize. Kevin knows this about me,
Yeah.
but one of the things I've committed to is making sure that if you commit to giving me time for the show, that I commit to staying on track. So just want to make sure. Um, you know, Dorothy, I want to go back to that point you just made, and I think I believe Kevin would be able to agree with me on this. Um, in the military, that's a big thing where like I knew too many first sergeants who had marriage after marriage after marriage, and not because they were bad people, but because the stress of their job. Essentially, the first sergeant. I think you all know this, but for the audience, the first sergeant is like the boss of the office, the general manager, and he's a non. Gosh darn it.
Commissioned.
Yeah, non. Thanks, Kevin. He's the highest ranking non-commissioned officer in the company, and essentially he would report to what would be the CEO of that company, and the stress that they were under because they were responsible for all of the lives of the people in that company, and too many of them didn't have coping mechanisms and would go home, and they really lived a life as a first responder a lot because most of their life was dealt with, quite frankly, soldiers like me who would get done from work for the day and head straight to the bar, stay at the bar until it's time for the next formation the next morning, and do really dumb things. And they had to deal with all those problems that people like me created, and the stress level that brings to them. It really does tear up the home life. So I think that's a great point as well. And I think it's one of those things that mask that toxic positivity for them because they're always in a crappy mood, and they don't have the ability to necessarily step back and say there is a lot of good happening. Now, the ones that were able to do it, those gentlemen or ladies are real leaders because they're able to put all of that aside, still go home and embrace their family and have that disconnect. So I think it takes a really good character to be able to do that, because all of the bad stuff they see all day, that's a huge toxin in someone's life. So my goal is I like to leave the show and leave the audience with some takeaways, and so I would like to throw this out there to whoever wants to go first. What advice do you have for a leader who is dealing with a situation where maybe they're exposed to a lot of toxicity, and maybe they're getting negative feedback? So I don't want to taint your advice too much, but on the topic of optimism versus toxic positivity, I'll throw that out there to the two of you, whoever wants to go first, and offer any advice you have for someone watching who can better manage that aspect of their life.
Go for it, Dorothy, please.
I'm thinking of this, like, what would I tell a leader? I would just say, great. I would just say, I keep getting the word communication, like just being communication with your people, and just, and sometimes we got to do what we got to do. Like if you have somebody that's really toxic, you just need to get rid of them. However, also on that note though, giving them the grace that they possibly need. Maybe they're going through something. You have no idea what somebody is going through. And I would say if you have one person that is constantly being negative or toxic, just maybe have that conversation with them, because they could be, you have no idea. They could be going through something at home, whether that be maybe their father's got cancer or their wife is sick. You have really no idea what's going through that. So just having the grace, having the conversation, being in communication with that person, but not letting it affect the entire team. So.
Thank you. That's fair. Appreciate that, Dorothy. Kevin, you can go next if you want to, or I can go. It's up to you.
Sure. The area I would recommend is really, it's looking at it through a positive lens. So you have to acknowledge the challenges that are real, the reality of your situation, regardless of what it is, but then looking at it through a lens that you can overcome anything you're dealing with. So as long as you have that perspective in mind, the opportunity to succeed is present. But it really just takes into account your willingness to work to achieve whatever you're trying to get to. So it doesn't relinquish or make the issues at hand disappear. It's just really enables you to get past them if you're willing to execute.
Yes, appreciate that, Kevin, and thank you for that. So my parting advice for any leader, it's a little bit different than what I think Kevin and Dorothy shared, and it is personal advice for me. As you know, I open this up by saying I've taken a lot of this criticism where people accuse me of being, toxically positive. What I would encourage you to do is be authentically you. And you can acknowledge the fact that these things are happening, but it doesn't have to change who you are or your reaction. And if you get to the point where it does start to weigh on you and it does start to impact your decisions, I think you need to take that step back and do a little bit of self-care to remain true to who you are, remain true to your core values. Because I've written about this many times and I will write about it again. The world has plenty of negative influences out there. Don't be afraid to be a positive one, because I firmly believe that I'm going to be me. And for those, I know we've talked about this in other shows. I drive a Jeep Wrangler, and it has the angry grill. If you know what that is, it looks like grumpy eyes. And I did the grumpy eyes for you. That's about as much as you're going to get. But everywhere I go, people who know me say, "Why did you name your Jeep Curmudgeon? You're not grumpy at all." And plenty of photos of me exist where I try to take a selfie with my family and I'm doing this old guy look as I'm staring at the phone. And so as my 13-year-old and I were trying to come up with a name for the Jeep to put on the front of the Jeep, she's like, "Dad, the Jeep looks like you." And so I'm like, "Oh, we'll call it Curmudgeon then." And my daughter's like, "That's perfect." And not that I am grumpy, but I do make that face. And so to me, it's always a fun story where people are like, why curmudgeon? And for those who know what curmudgeon means, grumpy old man. So I guess my parting advice, I want to get back to it and stay centered on it, is stay true to who you are and don't let these outside influences and criticisms bring you down. And that's what your brand can be. That's what you can be known for. So thank you again to my guests. I appreciate you joining this morning, giving me your time. Please follow these folks on social media. Their books have appeared on the screen. The links to buy the books are going to be in the comments of this video, wherever you find it. And if you don't find this video with links available, please go directly to their social media pages. I know, Dorothy, is your book on Amazon?
Both books are on Amazon. Yep.
Okay, and I know
Yeah.
Kevin's are as well. So I'll probably edit this piece out so it looks like I'm smarter than I am. And I want to thank you again. I hope that you've subscribed at getdoolin.com. It's a training platform with a variety of different training resources for really any industry involved in any type of leadership. Hope you have a great day.